The sky above Manhattan glowed the faint silver blue of early morning when the convoy of black luxury cars turned into the underground parking of Al-Sahim Global Holdings Tower. By the time the first elevator reached the 51st floor, the building staff had already been whispering for hours. The Saudi billionaire, Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim, was coming in person. No one wanted to make a mistake that day. The conference room on the top floor looked like something out of a movie, floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealing a panoramic view of the city, a long mahogany table polished until it shone, and a massive golden clock ticking softly at one end. The air smelled faintly of citrus and cedarwood, the scent of imported incense that Sheikh Fahd's team had requested to be diffused throughout the space. It was a morning that would decide the fate of Harbor Tech Industries, the American company about to merge with Al-Sahim Global Holdings. This wasn't just business, it was legacy. The deal was worth billions and would link East and West in a historic partnership. At 8:45 a.m., the executives began to gather. Richard Caldwell, the company's senior vice president, strutted in first, tugging at his navy tie and whispering orders to his assistant. His sharp blonde hair, his cologne, his voice, everything about him screamed confidence. Or arrogance. "Make sure the presentation slides are in order," he snapped. "And someone get the janitorial crew to finish with that floor before the sheik arrives. I don't want streak marks showing up in reflections." At the far end of the room, a quiet man in a gray janitor's uniform nodded. His name tag read Malcolm Reed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with a calm efficiency that didn't fit the chaos around him. His mop glided across the floor like a brush painting silence into the noise. No one noticed the way he occasionally paused near the panoramic windows, taking in the skyline, his eyes thoughtful, almost wistful. To everyone else, he as invisible. A background detail in a painting of power. By 9:10, the energy in the room changed. The air felt thicker. Phones went silent. Every executive took their seat, eyes darting toward the door. Then came the sound, the slow, measured echo of footsteps in the corridor. The doors opened. Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim entered, surrounded by 2 aides and a translator. He was a tall man in his early 60s, wearing a dark tailored thobe beneath a charcoal bisht embroidered with gold. His presence filled the room effortlessly. There was no arrogance in his face, only command, a quiet authority that came from knowing he didn't have to prove anything. He greeted each executive with a nod, his dark eyes sharp and intelligent. "Assalamu alaikum," he said softly, his Arabic flowing like poetry. The translator, a young man with slick back hair and nervous hands, hesitated for a moment before whispering, "Peace be upon you." The executives nodded stiffly, some mumbling a polite, "hello," in return. Caldwell leaned toward another executive and whispered, "Guess we're starting the desert poetry early." He chuckled quietly. The joke went nowhere, but the arrogance lingered in the air. Sheikh Fahd took his seat at the head of the table. His aides laid out papers, contracts, and leather-bound folders embossed with gold. The sheik looked out over the skyline for a long moment, as if weighing something invisible. "Before we speak of business," he began slowly, in Arabic. His voice carried calm strength. "Let us speak of understanding." The translator hesitated again, flipping through his notes. He seemed unsure. The sheik continued, his tone rising slightly, the rhythm of his words deliberate and dignified. "Respect," he said, still in Arabic, "is not shown by words, but by how we listen when we do not understand." The translator fumbled. He caught fragments but not meaning. His version came out awkward, half lost. The executives exchanged puzzled looks. Caldwell shifted in his chair impatiently. "Can we get to the point?" he muttered. The sheikh continued speaking in Arabic, undeterred. His words became more layered, quoting an old Bedouin saying about how character is revealed in moments of silence. The translator froze. He didn't know this dialect. The room sat in growing discomfort. Finally, Caldwell leaned back and said with a smirk, "Maybe he's ordering lunch." A few executives laughed under their breath. The sound echoed against the glass walls like a scratch on glass. At the edge of the room, Malcolm's mop stopped moving. He had been standing near the corner, quietly listening. His eyes, usually steady and unreadable, lifted slightly toward the sheikh. There was something in his expression, recognition. Sheikh Fahd's gaze, sharp as a hawk's, drifted across the table, past the smirking faces, and landed on the janitor. Their eyes met. For the first time since entering the room, the sheikh smiled faintly. Then he spoke again, in Arabic, this time more softly, like a private test. "Among the arrogant, humility hides in shadows. But those who sweep the floor often see the world as it truly is." No one moved. Malcolm took a quiet breath. The mop handle in his hand trembled slightly. Then, in a voice deep but calm, he replied, also in Arabic. "And those who walk the desert know that wisdom can wear dust on its feet." The sound stopped time. Every head turned. The translator's jaw dropped. Caldwell's smirk vanished. Sheikh Fahd's eyes widened slightly. He rose from his chair, astonishment crossing his face like a sunrise. "You speak Arabic?" he asked, switching to English. Malcolm nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. I learned while serving overseas." "You spoke beautifully. I didn't mean to intrude." The sheikh's lips curved into a genuine smile. "Intrude? My friend, you were the only one who understood." The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but transformative. In that glass tower above New York, the hierarchy inverted itself. Without a single command. Malcolm returned to his work, his movements slow, deliberate, and dignified. The sheikh watched him for a long moment, then turned back to the table, his expression colder now as he surveyed the men who had laughed. "Perhaps," he said in flawless English, "today we will begin with a lesson before a deal." The executives shifted uncomfortably. The meeting hadn't yet begun, but everyone already understood, this wasn't going to be the kind of morning they expected. Outside, the wind brushed against the tower's glass, whispering through the city. Inside, one quiet janitor had just changed everything, with nothing more than words. The next morning's sunlight slanted through the towering windows of the 51st floor, reflecting off the chrome and glass like shards of gold. The skyline shimmered in the distance, but inside the conference room of Al-Sahim Global Holdings, the atmosphere was anything but radiant. The executives had arrived early, unusually early. The events of the previous day still hung over them like smoke that refused to clear. None of them had quite processed what had happened. The janitor, had spoken to the Saudi tycoon in flawless Arabic. And not just spoken, connected. Every man in that room, especially Richard Caldwell, had felt a sting he couldn't quite name. It wasn't embarrassment, exactly. It was the discomfort of being revealed, of seeing arrogance exposed in broad daylight. Caldwell sat now at the far end of the table, nursing a black coffee and scrolling through his phone. The headline on his business feed caught his eye. Mysterious polyglot janitor stuns billionaire sheikh at New York merger meeting. He grimaced. Great. Viral already. Meanwhile, the sheikh was due back any minute to resume the talks. There would be contracts, numbers, negotiations, but Caldwell knew no one would remember the spreadsheets. They'd remember the janitor who spoke poetry. When the elevator doors opened, silence swallowed the room once again. Sheikh Fahd stepped in with quiet poise, his traditional attire replaced by a dark western suit that somehow made him appear even more regal. His silver beard gleamed against the crisp collar. "Good morning," he said evenly, his accent refined yet thick with the rhythm of Riyadh. "I trust you have all rested." A murmur of polite greetings followed. The translator, a man named Tariq, stood beside him clutching a binder, his eyes darting nervously. Sheikh Fahd's gaze moved slowly across the table, resting briefly on Caldwell, who instantly sat straighter. Then his eyes drifted toward the back corner, the place where Malcolm usually stood. The janitor was there, quiet as always, polishing the brass door handles. Their eyes met for half a second. The sheikh inclined his head in subtle respect before turning to face the group. "I wish to begin today," he said, "with a story from my homeland." He spoke in Arabic again, rich and fluid, his tone deliberate, not for performance, but for meaning. Tariq the translator began to follow along, his lips moving soundlessly, trying to keep up. But the sheikh's rhythm was intricate, like an old poem passed down through desert generations. He told of a traveler who came to a village seeking water. The villagers, judging him by his tattered clothes, ignored him. But a young boy brought him a clay cup, saying, "A man's thirst tells more about him than his robe." The sheikh paused. "Who," he asked softly in Arabic, "understands the moral?" Silence. Tariq looked panicked, eyes scanning his notes. He managed a halting translation. His Excellency says, a man should not be judged by clothing?" The sheikh's brow furrowed slightly. His words had not been about clothing, they had been about humility, perception, and the blindness of pride. He looked around. None of the executives met his eyes. Only Malcolm, still standing near the back, kept his gaze steady. Then, in Arabic, Malcolm said quietly, "He means that truth wears no silk, and wisdom often arrives wearing dust." Every head turned. Sheikh Fahd's expression softened. "Exactly," he said, switching to English now so they could all understand. "He understands. The point is not fashion, but vision." The traveler was the wise man, and the villagers were fools blinded by pride. A ripple of discomfort passed around the table. The sheikh continued, "Yesterday, I spoke to test your hearts. Today, I speak to open your ears." He turned to the translator kindly. "Tariq, you may sit. I will speak for myself." The translator exhaled in visible relief and stepped aside. Then, addressing everyone directly, Sheikh Fahd continued in measured English, "In my country, we say, a person's tongue can be polished like gold, but it is the silence between words that reveals who they are." Yesterday, one man understood that silence. He gestured lightly toward Malcolm. "The one you call Janitor." Malcolm lowered his head humbly. "I was just listening, sir." "Precisely," said the sheikh. "Listening is the first mark of intelligence." Caldwell shifted in his seat, jaw tight. He had always believed that money, connections, and Western polish gave him superiority in every room. But this was unbearable. He leaned forward slightly. "With respect, Your Excellency," he said, voice honeyed but sharp beneath, "I think we're here to discuss numbers, not proverbs." The sheikh looked at him, expression unreadable. "Ah," he said softly, And yet numbers mean nothing if the men behind them have no character. The air chilled. Caldwell tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. Of course, he murmured. The Sheikh turned back to Malcolm. Tell me, my friend, he said warmly, how did you come to learn Arabic so well? Malcolm hesitated, wiping his hands on a cloth. The entire boardroom stared at him, CEOs, lawyers, millionaires, waiting for a janitor to speak. I was stationed in Riyadh, sir, Malcolm said finally. Back when I served in the U.S. Air Force. I worked with a few local translators during reconstruction projects. They were kind enough to teach me. I fell in love with the language, with the way it carries respect in every syllable. After I came home, I just kept studying. Sheikh Fahd's eyes gleamed with quiet admiration. And now you work here? Yes, sir, Malcolm said softly. Life takes turns. My mother got sick. I took care of her. Lost some jobs along the way. But I'm grateful for this one. The Sheikh was silent for a moment, thoughtful. Then he said, in every empire, men rise and fall. But the measure of a soul is not where he stands, it's how he carries his dignity when no one's looking. Caldwell cleared his throat loudly. Shall we proceed to the merger terms? The Sheikh looked at him again, this time with the calm intensity of a man who had already decided something important. We shall, he said. But first, we must sign another agreement. Caldwell blinked. Another? Yes. The Sheikh smiled faintly. An agreement that in every room where my company invests, respect will be the first language spoken. No one dared respond. Malcolm resumed quietly polishing the handles, his reflection glimmering in the brass, not as a janitor, but as a man whose humility had somehow shifted the very center of the room. The Sheikh turned toward the window, gazing out at the city that pulsed below them. In America, he said softly, you build towers that touch the clouds. But perhaps you forget that the foundation, the man who sweeps the floor, holds it all together. The wind outside howled faintly against the glass, like a voice agreeing from another world. The meeting would continue, contracts would be signed, and money would change hands. But something deeper had already been sealed, something that no pen could ever record. And none of them, not even Malcolm, knew that this moment was only the beginning. Because by the end of this deal, the janitor who listened would become the man everyone would have to hear. The conference resumed under the low hum of tension. The city below glittered with 1,000 moving lights, but inside the glass tower, the air was heavy with pride, discomfort, and something unspoken, respect earned but not yet fully understood. Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim sat at the head of the table, hands folded calmly, the faintest reflection of morning light tracing the gold edges of his cufflinks. He had the serenity of a man who didn't need to prove power, it simply existed in his silence. Across from him sat Richard Caldwell, the senior vice president of Harbor Tech, trying his best to mask unease with authority. The merger contract lay before them, thick and weighty, filled with clauses, numbers, and futures. But to everyone in that room, the real negotiation wasn't on paper. It was happening in the quiet glances exchanged between Sheikh Fahd and the janitor in gray, Malcolm Reed. Malcolm had resumed his cleaning, cautious not to intrude. His mop moved in smooth arcs, the rhythmic motion like a background melody beneath the murmurs of business talk. Yet everyone felt his presence now. Yesterday, he had been invisible, today, every word, every silence, seemed to orbit around him. Let's get back to work, Caldwell said sharply, his tone cutting through the tension like a knife. We've got $12 billion worth of logistics to finalize. He clicked his pen. No more stories, please. The sheik didn't look up. Stories, he said softly, are the mirrors of a man's ethics. But proceed, Mr. Caldwell. I am listening. Caldwell began his presentation with exaggerated precision, projecting slides filled with numbers, graphs, and projected market growth. His voice echoed confidently through the room, but beneath that confidence was a gnawing irritation. He couldn't stand the memory of the janitor's Arabic, the applause that hadn't been given but was silently understood. He clicked to the next slide, turning to the sheik with a strained smile. As you can see, Your Excellency, this deal secures our mutual dominance in the Middle East sector. You'll find no better partner in technology or infrastructure expansion. The sheik nodded politely, eyes focused but detached. He wasn't impressed by arrogance disguised as ambition. Caldwell continued, his enthusiasm growing forced. He threw around phrases like synergy and global efficiency, but it was clear that he was talking to numbers, not people. Then, in a moment of careless confidence, he laughed. And of course, he said, tapping his laser pointer on the screen, this collaboration will finally teach our Western staff to handle the Saudi way of business. No camels involved, I promise. The words hung in the air like a slap. A few executives chuckled nervously, unsure whether to join in. One woman lowered her eyes. Someone coughed. The sheik's hands slowly lowered to the table. His expression remained calm, but the stillness was sharper than anger. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the corner of the room, a quiet, measured voice broke the silence. In Arabic, Malcolm said softly, there's a proverb, a fool speaks to amuse himself, but a wise man speaks to build others. Every head turned. Caldwell froze. Excuse me. Malcolm's tone was respectful, but his eyes held steel. It means words are bricks, you either build bridges or walls with them. The sheik's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. Well said, he murmured. Caldwell forced a chuckle, trying to regain footing. It was a joke, he said defensively. Lighten up. No harm done. The sheik turned toward him, voice like calm thunder. You think respect is a matter of humor? Caldwell opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The sheik stood, his tall frame commanding every inch of the room. The faint scent of oud lingered as he stepped closer to the window, gazing down at the river of cars below. In my culture, he said, voice low but resonant, a joke can reveal the heart. When men laugh at others, they expose their poverty, not of money, but of soul. The executives sat frozen. No one dared move. The sheik turned back, his eyes meeting Malcolm's. Translate for them, my friend, he said in Arabic. Malcolm hesitated, but obeyed. He repeated the words slowly, perfectly, the Arabic flowing from his tongue with poetic precision. As the sounds filled the room, the executives listened in awe, not to understand, but to feel. The melody of the language carried dignity none of them could fake. When he finished, the sheik nodded approvingly. You see, gentlemen, some truths need no translation. He looked directly at Caldwell. You mistake humility for weakness. But humility is simply strength under control. The air crackled with the weight of those words. Caldwell's face flushed red. He looked away, pretending to study his notes, but the paper trembled faintly in his hand. The sheik turned to the rest of the room. Tell me, he said, how many languages are spoken in your company? One executive stammered, mostly English, sir. The sheik replied, and yet language is not just words. It is respect. You have lost one tongue entirely, the language of listening. He walked slowly around the table, his gaze passing over each face. You build towers, he said, but the foundation beneath them is crumbling. Not from concrete failure, but from pride. His eyes returned once again to Malcolm. And yet, among you, one man still remembers how to listen. Tell me, Malcolm Reed, what do you hear in this room? Malcolm swallowed, the weight of every gaze pressing down on him. He hesitated, but the Sheikh's calm encouragement gave him courage. I hear, Malcolm said carefully, a lot of people talking to be heard, but very few listening to understand. The Sheikh smiled faintly. And that, he said, is why most empires fall long before they are conquered. In my culture. Silence afterward was total. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly across the horizon, as if the city itself were responding. The rain began, soft at first, tapping against the glass like the heartbeat of the moment. The Sheikh returned to his seat, adjusting his cufflinks as if nothing unusual had occurred. Now, he said, we may discuss business. No one dared interrupt again. Later that day, as the executives left one by one, Malcolm quietly finished his duties, collecting empty coffee cups and discarded papers. He didn't notice the Sheikh watching him from across the room. When Malcolm finally turned to leave, the Sheikh spoke. Mr. Reed, he said. Malcolm stopped, startled. Yes, sir. The Sheikh gestured for him to approach. There are men who wear suits and know nothing of respect, he said softly. And there are men who carry mops but understand the dignity of kings. Malcolm didn't know how to respond. I just try to do my job right, sir. You do it with heart, said the Sheikh. That is rarer than you think. He extended his hand, a gesture that froze the last few remaining executives in disbelief. The janitor and the billionaire shook hands, eye to eye, equal for one sacred instant. As Malcolm stepped back, the Sheikh added quietly, do not disappear from my sight tomorrow. I will have need of your understanding. Malcolm nodded slowly, a strange mix of confusion and pride blooming in his chest. Yes, Your Excellency. The Sheikh smiled faintly. And Malcolm, he said, switching once more to Arabic, you have silenced a room of noise with a single truth. Never underestimate the power of a quiet man. The rain outside deepened, streaking down the windows like melted silver. And as the Sheikh departed, his words lingered, soft, unshakable, and immortal. In that moment, every man in that room understood what real power looked like. It wasn't money. It wasn't position. It was dignity, spoken fluently in the language of silence. Morning light returned to the 51st floor like judgment, bright, revealing, and merciless. Every surface gleamed with the sterile perfection of power, marble floors polished to a mirror sheen, steel beams reflecting the city skyline, and walls that seemed to hum with secrets. But beneath that immaculate surface, something had shifted. The laughter from yesterday was gone. The smug confidence had evaporated. Even the sound of expensive shoes clicking across the tiles felt cautious. At the end of the hall, Malcolm Reed rolled his janitorial cart forward, the faint squeak of its wheels the only sound that dared interrupt the tension. He moved like he always did, quietly, methodically, but this time, every executive who passed him lowered their gaze. They no longer saw a uniform. They saw a man who had silenced a room full of power with a single sentence. Inside the conference chamber, Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim was already seated. His hands rested lightly on a leather-bound folder, a glass of Arabic coffee steamed gently beside him. He looked up when Malcolm entered to dust the brass fixtures. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," said the Sheikh in English, his tone warm but formal. "Good morning, Your Excellency," Malcolm replied, startled that the billionaire remembered his name. "I ask that you be allowed to remain during today's session," the Sheikh continued, motioning for him to stay. "You may continue your work, just listen." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The previous day's humiliation had wounded his pride deeply, and now he could barely look at the janitor without feeling the sting of exposure. The Sheikh began the meeting with deliberate calm. "Yesterday," he said, "we spoke about business. But what is business without humanity? What is profit without conscience?" He glanced toward Malcolm. "Today, I want to discuss the unseen foundation of every empire." Caldwell cleared his throat. "Your Excellency, if I may, Harbor Tech operates with integrity. I don't think our moral philosophy needs review." The Sheikh raised an eyebrow. "Integrity? Yesterday, your joke suggested otherwise." A flush crept up Caldwell's neck. "With respect, sir, it was just humor." "Respect," interrupted the Sheikh, "is not what we claim in words but what we practice in presence." He turned to Malcolm. "Would you translate that in Arabic for me, please?" Malcolm hesitated, then nodded. His voice was smooth, resonant, carrying a quiet authority that made the words sound sacred. "Alitaram la yathbut bil kalam, walakin bil wujud." Respect is not proven by words, but by presence. The sound rolled through the room like soft thunder. It wasn't just translation, it was transformation. Every syllable came alive in Malcolm's tone, rich with the cadence of someone who understood what he was saying, not merely repeating it. The Sheikh smiled faintly. "You see, even the sound carries weight. Arabic teaches rhythm and patience, qualities missing in modern ambition." He leaned back, eyes drifting to the skyline. "Do you know why I built my first company, Mr. Caldwell?" Caldwell shook his head warily. "I built it from nothing," the Sheikh said. "In the deserts outside Jeddah, I once cleaned my father's workshop floor. I swept sand from between gears until my hands cracked. My father told me, if you cannot honor the ground you work on, you do not deserve to rise above it." He turned to Malcolm again. "Tell me, what do you think of that?" Malcolm blinked, unsure how to answer in such a room. "I think your father was right," he said quietly. "Respect begins where no one's watching." "Exactly." The Sheikh's smile deepened. "You understand more than most men paid 100 times your salary." Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect," he muttered, "I don't see how janitorial opinions are relevant to an international merger." The Sheikh's gaze turned cold. "Then perhaps your company is not ready for mine." A stunned silence followed. Caldwell's face drained of color. Of course, I meant no disrespect, Your Excellency." "Intentions are smoke," the Sheikh said softly. "Actions are fire." He looked back at Malcolm. "Mr. Reed, please, tell me what you hear when you listen to these men speak of partnership." Malcolm froze. All eyes turned toward him, lawyers, CEOs, translators, and the most powerful foreign investor they'd ever seen. His pulse quickened, but when the Sheikh nodded gently, something in him steadied. "I hear people talking about power," Malcolm said slowly. "About control. Ownership. Profit." He paused, glancing down at his hands, rough, calloused, honest hands. "But real partnership doesn't start there. It starts with trust. With seeing people for who they are, not what title they hold." No one spoke. Even Caldwell, for once, said nothing. The sheikh leaned forward, his voice soft as a prayer. Continue. Malcolm swallowed, then went on. Yesterday, when I spoke Arabic, I wasn't trying to show off. I just couldn't stand the disrespect. My mother used to tell me, silence feeds arrogance. Sometimes you have to speak truth, even if it shakes the ground you're standing on. The sheikh nodded, eyes gleaming. And you shook it well. Caldwell's knuckles whitened around his pen. He forced a laugh, but it broke midway. This is all very poetic, but we have business to run. If we're done with moral lessons. The sheikh raised a hand. We are not done until understanding begins. He stood slowly, his figure illuminated by the white glow of the city beyond the windows. Mr. Reed, he said, you have shown humility, courage, and wisdom. You have done what these men have not, spoken truth without fear of losing anything. That is what leadership is. Malcolm blinked, stunned. Sir. I'm just doing my job. And you've done it better than most kings, the sheikh replied. He turned toward the executives. Gentlemen, the man you ignore cleans the ground you walk upon. He sees what you miss. He listens to what you silence. That is why he is more valuable than any consultant you've hired. Caldwell finally lost his composure. With all due respect, this is absurd, he snapped. We're discussing billions and trade, not philosophy. This janitor doesn't belong in this room. The sheikh's voice thundered across the room, then neither do you. The outburst was quiet yet immense, its echo filling every corner like an ancient decree. Caldwell froze, face pale, mouth slightly open. The sheikh continued, tone lowering but cutting deeper. Power without humility is a house built on sand. And I will not build empires with men who cannot see the humanity before their eyes. The silence afterward was total. Malcolm stood motionless, unsure if he should bow, speak, or leave. But then, the sheikh turned to him with the same calm he had shown since the beginning. Mr. Reed, he said, you will dine with me tonight. We have much to discuss. Malcolm stared, disbelief flooding his face. Sir, thank you, but I'm not sure I belong. You belong, the sheikh said firmly, because you understand. That is rarer than wealth. He turned to the stunned room. Let today be remembered not for signatures or contracts, but for the moment a man without a title reminded us all of our humanity. Then, to Malcolm, he added quietly, there will come a time when you speak again, not as a janitor, but as a man whose voice the world must hear. Malcolm nodded slowly, humbled, overwhelmed, and silent. Outside, the sky shifted as sunlight broke through the gray clouds over Manhattan. The reflection caught on the windows and scattered like gold dust across the room. And in that light, clear, blinding, divine, the janitor who once swept unnoticed corners stood revealed as something far greater. Not an employee. Not a servant. But a mirror, showing every man in that room what true honor looked like. The black limousine glided through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, headlights streaking gold across the puddles. Inside, silence reigned, a kind of sacred quiet that only followed moments that changed lives. Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim sat reclined, hands folded over his cane, watching the city blur by. Beside him, his aide typed rapidly on a tablet, updating meeting schedules, calls, contracts. Yet the sheikh's thoughts were far from business. His mind lingered on Malcolm Reed, the man who had spoken truth like a prayer inside that glass tower. The sheik had seen men bend for power, flatter for opportunity, and lie for gain. But humility, pure, grounded, unpolished, was something he'd learned to recognize like the scent of rain after drought. And Malcolm had carried it effortlessly, unaware of its worth. He tapped the glass. "Cancel my dinner with the Chamber of Commerce," he said softly. "I wish to dine elsewhere tonight." At precisely 7 that evening, a black sedan pulled up outside a modest apartment building in Queens. The driver stepped out, umbrella in hand, and opened the door for the sheik. Neighbors peered curiously from their windows, uncertain what to make of the sight, a Saudi billionaire stepping onto cracked pavement under a flickering streetlight. On the 3rd floor, Malcolm stood frozen at his door, still wearing his work shirt. His tie was loose, his hands were trembling. He'd expected perhaps a phone call, not the sheik himself. "Mr. Reed," the sheik greeted warmly. "May I come in?" Of course, sir," Malcolm stammered, stepping aside quickly. The apartment was small but immaculate. A shelf of worn books lined one wall, titles in English and Arabic both. A photograph of a smiling woman in a hospital gown rested beside a vase of wilted flowers. The sheik noticed it immediately. "Your mother?" Malcolm nodded, his expression softening. "She passed 2 years ago. Heart failure. I was taking care of her the last few years. She raised me alone." The sheik inclined his head respectfully. "May her soul rest in peace." They sat at the kitchen table, old wood, chipped edges, but wiped spotless. Malcolm poured tea into mismatched mugs, apologizing for the lack of proper hospitality. The sheik smiled. A clean cup offered with sincerity is better than gold handed with pride. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Then the sheik said gently, "Tell me your story, Mr. Reed. You've listened enough. Tonight, I wish to listen to you." Malcolm took a slow breath. "I was born right here in New York," he began. "My mother worked as a nurse for 30 years. My father left before I could remember him. We didn't have much, but she made sure I learned to respect people. She used to say, 'Never let your anger speak louder than your truth.'" He smiled faintly, looking down at his hands. "After high school, I joined the Air Force. I wanted to see the world, maybe make something of myself. They sent me to Riyadh during my second tour. That's where I first heard Arabic, not the kind from books, but the kind people spoke in prayer, in poetry, in love." The sheik leaned forward slightly, intrigued. Malcolm continued, his voice distant, as if walking through memory. "There was a librarian on base, an old man named Yusuf. He used to bring me coffee and correct my pronunciation when I practiced. I think he saw I was lonely. He taught me verses from Al-Mutanabbi, bits of the Quran, old Bedouin sayings. I didn't realize at the time, but I was learning more than a language. I was learning a way to see the world." He chuckled softly. "When I came back home, things didn't go as planned. My mom got sick. I left the service to take care of her. I took any job I could, construction, delivery, night shifts. Then the janitor position opened at Harbor Tech. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I could pay her medical bills." The sheik listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving Malcolm's face. "She used to wait up for me every night," Malcolm said, voice trembling now. "I'd tell her about the rich men I cleaned after, how they never even looked at me. And she'd laugh and say, 'Let them look down on you, son. The view from the top is easy, the view from the floor teaches you who's standing on shaky ground. The Sheikh smiled faintly. A wise woman. She was, Malcolm said quietly. She told me, you'll never lose dignity if you give respect first. That's why yesterday, when Mr. Caldwell made that joke, I just couldn't stay silent. His eyes glistened. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. But I couldn't let her lessons die in me. For a long time, the Sheikh said nothing. The city's distant sirens filled the space between their words. Then he spoke, his voice soft with reverence. Your mother taught you what many kings forget. She taught you adab, the discipline of the heart. In Arabic, we say, he who loses adab, loses his shadow. You, my friend, have not lost yours. Malcolm swallowed hard, humbled. I just try to live right, sir. The Sheikh regarded him for a long moment, his gaze both gentle and penetrating. You've lived with honor in silence. Now it's time the world hears that silence. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it on the table. This, he said, is a formal offer. A position within my U.S. operations as cultural liaison and ethics consultant. You will oversee community engagement, translation, and internal conduct training. Your voice will matter. Malcolm stared at the envelope as though it were on fire. Sir, I'm not qualified. I'm just. Stop, the Sheikh interrupted kindly. You're not just anything. The world measures men by titles, I measure them by truth. You spoke truth when others hid behind pride. That is leadership. Tears welled in Malcolm's eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. I don't know what to say. Say yes, the Sheikh said simply. Say you will honor your mother's lessons on a larger stage. Malcolm nodded slowly, almost disbelieving. Yes. I'll do my best, sir. That, said the Sheikh, smiling, is all any great man has ever promised. He rose, his presence filling the small apartment like warmth spreading through cold air. Mr. Reed, remember this night. The world doesn't change when the rich speak, it changes when the humble refuse to stay silent. Malcolm stood as well, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Your Excellency. You don't know what this means to me. The Sheikh's eyes softened. Oh, I do. Because I once swept floors, too. He extended his hand once more, and Malcolm shook it, this time not as a janitor to a billionaire, but as two men bound by something far greater than money, dignity earned in silence. When the Sheikh left, the rain had stopped. The city shimmered beneath the glow of streetlights, every puddle reflecting a patch of heaven. Malcolm stood by the window long after the limousine disappeared from sight. The envelope sat on the table, unopened, heavy with promise. In the quiet, he looked at his mother's photograph and whispered, "You were right, Mama. Respect always comes back home." And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly, not in warning, but in applause. He next morning broke clear and gold, the city washed clean after a night of rain. The sun rose over Manhattan's skyline like a silent benediction, spilling light across the gleaming glass of Al-Sahim Global Holdings Tower. Inside, the same room that had once echoed with arrogance now felt newly awake, charged with an energy that was difficult to name. The executives filed in quietly, subdued. They had all read the internal memo that circulated overnight. Mr. Malcolm Reed is to be present at today's final signing as cultural liaison, per Sheikh Fahd's directive. No one said it aloud, but the message was unmistakable. Something fundamental had shifted. The man they had once dismissed as invisible now sat among them, on purpose. At precisely 9 o'clock, the double doors opened. Sheikh Fahd entered first, his black bish trailing lightly, his stride measured. But this morning, he wasn't alone. Walking a respectful half-step behind him was Malcolm Reed, dressed in a simple dark suit lent by the Sheikh's staff. It fit him perfectly at the shoulders, but it carried him like armor. The executives rose awkwardly, unsure whether to greet him as a peer or an anomaly. "Please," said the Sheikh, taking his seat. "Let us continue." Malcolm moved to stand near the wall, but the Sheikh gestured to an empty chair beside him. "Sit, Mr. Reed. Those who listen with humility deserve to speak with honor." Malcolm hesitated, then obeyed. His hands rested on the table, calloused fingers brushing the edge of the contract folder. The reflection of sunlight on the polished surface threw lines of gold across his skin, as if the city itself were acknowledging him. The meeting began. Legal teams reviewed details, accountants confirmed figures, and advisors murmured through their earpieces. But beneath the surface hum of commerce, tension flickered, especially in Caldwell, who sat 2 seats down, expression carved in stone. At one point he leaned forward, voice tight. "Your Excellency, we still need to confirm the allocation of regional oversight. Our board expects an American face for public representation, someone familiar with U.S. business optics." The Sheikh looked up, eyes calm but unyielding. "You mean someone white?" Caldwell's mouth opened, then closed again. I didn't mean." "You did," said the Sheikh quietly. "And that, Mr. Caldwell, is why this discussion must continue." He turned to Malcolm. "Would you care to translate a proverb for me, my friend?" Malcolm nodded. The Sheikh spoke in Arabic. "The desert does not ask who walks upon it. It only remembers the footprints of those who walk with respect." Malcolm repeated the lines softly in English. The words hung in the air, weightless yet heavy. The Sheikh's gaze swept the table. "This company will not bear the stain of small minds. If I am to partner with Harbor Tech, then dignity will be part of its policy, non-negotiable." He paused, then added, "Perhaps you will learn that character speaks louder than color." A murmur rippled through the room. Caldwell leaned back, his authority shrinking beneath the force of quiet truth. For the next hour, the meeting proceeded in strange harmony. The Sheikh dictated clauses ensuring employee equity and cross-cultural training. Malcolm offered small clarifications, translating idioms and cultural nuances where words failed. His voice had steadiness now, like a man who had stepped from shadow into daylight and found his footing. At one point, a junior executive, young, nervous, accidentally dropped a pen. As he bent to retrieve it, Malcolm reached first, handing it back with a smile. The young man whispered, "Thank you, sir." The single word, "sir," carried more power than a signature. It was the first sign that the room had begun to change. When the business concluded, Sheikh Fahd closed the folder and leaned back. "Gentlemen," he said, "contracts bind companies. But respect binds nations. Today, you will learn something no document can teach." He stood, motioning toward Malcolm. "Mr. Reed, may I ask you to share your mother's wisdom once more, the one you told me last night?" Malcolm hesitated, eyes flicking to the Sheikh. "Sir, that was personal." "All truth is personal," said the Sheikh. "That is why it moves hearts." Malcolm drew a slow breath. "She used to say, don't let bitterness make you blind, and don't let silence make you small. Speak when it matters, but speak with grace." The room was utterly still. Even the city's hum outside felt distant, as though the world had paused to listen. The sheikh smiled gently. And so you see, respect is not taught by wealth or title. It is inherited through humility. He turned to Caldwell. You called him a janitor. Yet he has given you a leadership lesson your board could never buy. Caldwell looked down, shame and anger wrestling behind his eyes. I understand, Your Excellency. No, the sheikh said softly. You hear me. You do not yet understand. He gestured toward the panoramic window, where the city stretched endlessly below. You build towers that touch the clouds, but you forget who lays their bricks. You design machines that run the world, but you ignore the hands that clean them. You believe leadership is standing above, but true leadership begins below. He looked again at Malcolm. You remind me of my father, he said, voice thickening slightly. He built engines by hand in the desert heat. He told me, the man who polishes steel gives it its shine. Without him, the machine means nothing. Malcolm's throat tightened. Your father was a wise man. The sheikh nodded. And so was your mother. When the sheikh finally rose to leave, the executives instinctively stood. He extended his hand to Caldwell first. You may still build an empire, he said quietly, if you learn first to build respect. Then, turning to Malcolm, he offered a deeper bow of the head, one of equal honor. Mr. Reed, our position begins immediately. You will report to my chief of staff. Your voice will help shape the code of ethics for every branch of my corporation. Malcolm blinked. Sir, I don't know what to say. Then say what your mother would say, the sheikh replied. Malcolm smiled faintly. Do it with grace. The sheikh's laughter rolled softly, a sound of genuine joy. Exactly. As the delegation filed out, the room exhaled. The air felt lighter, as though something invisible had been purified. Caldwell lingered behind, gathering his papers in silence. He glanced at Malcolm, shame flickering across his face. Reed, he said quietly, I was wrong. Malcolm looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. There was no triumph in his gaze, only calm. We all learn at our own pace, Mr. Caldwell. For the first time in his career, Caldwell extended his hand without condescension. Thank you, he said simply. Malcolm shook it. Respect is never lost. It's just forgotten. Outside, the sheikh stood by the entrance, gazing up at the skyscraper that pierced the morning sky. The sunlight caught his rings, scattering tiny points of brilliance across the pavement. He turned to Malcolm as the car door opened. You know, my friend, he said, people think wealth buys respect. But the truth is simpler, respect is the only wealth that survives when everything else burns. Malcolm nodded, eyes reflecting both exhaustion and awe. I believe that now. The sheikh smiled. Good. Because tomorrow, the world will learn it from you. As the car pulled away, Malcolm stood in the golden light, the reflection of the glass tower shimmering behind him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel small beneath it. He wasn't the man who cleaned floors anymore. He was the man who had taught the world to look down, and see the people who held it up. The evening sky over Manhattan was a tapestry of orange fire and violet dusk, the kind of light that made even glass and steel look like something holy. From the penthouse suite of the Ritz-Carlton, the city stretched endlessly, alive, glittering, untamed. Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the soft murmur of Arabic music playing from a golden gramophone behind him. A half-finished cup of Turkish coffee sat cooling beside a leather-bound notebook filled with neat Arabic script. But the sheikh was not reading, nor writing. He was waiting. A knock came at precisely 7:30. "Enter," he said. Malcolm Reed stepped in hesitantly. He wore the same dark suit as before, though now it had been tailored overnight to fit him perfectly. His shoes shone, his hair was neatly trimmed, but his eyes, steady, humble, remained unchanged. The sheikh smiled. "Mr. Reed," he said warmly, "you are prompt. I like that." "Old habit, sir," Malcolm replied softly. "In the Air Force, if you were on time, you were late." The sheikh's laugh was low, genuine. "Then you have lived 2 lives already, one of service, and one of silence. Tonight, perhaps, a third begins." He gestured toward the table where 2 places were set, silver plates gleaming beneath the chandelier's light. A feast of lamb, saffron rice, and dates filled the air with faint sweetness. "Please," the sheikh said. "Eat with me." Malcolm hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense. A man who speaks truth in the face of power is never an imposition. Sit." They ate quietly at first, the kind of silence that feels like respect rather than discomfort. Through the windows, the city glowed beneath them, tiny lights blinking like stars trapped in steel. After a while, the sheikh leaned back, studying Malcolm the way a scholar studies a rare manuscript. "Do you know why I asked you here?" Malcolm smiled faintly. "I assumed it wasn't for my mopping technique." The sheikh chuckled. "You see. Humor with humility. That is a rare combination." He folded his hands. "But no, Mr. Reed. I did not bring you here for work. I brought you here to offer a life." Malcolm frowned slightly. "A life?" The sheikh nodded slowly. "Not employment. Purpose." He rose and walked toward the window, looking out at the city that shimmered like a promise and a warning at once. "When I first came to America," he began, "I was not treated as a tycoon. I was a young man with an accent. People looked at my robes and my faith and saw mystery, sometimes threat. But I endured, because I remembered what my father told me, respect must be practiced even when it is not returned." He turned, eyes glinting in the light. "You, my friend, have practiced that truth without knowing it." Malcolm looked down, unsure how to respond. "Sir, I've made plenty of mistakes. I've lost jobs, opportunities. And yet," the sheikh interrupted gently, "you have never lost your dignity. That is why I trust you." He walked back to the table and pulled out a cream envelope sealed in gold wax. "I am expanding my educational foundation in Riyadh," he said. "It supports young workers, janitors, drivers, clerks, those forgotten by society. I want you to oversee its new branch in New York. I want you to be its director." Malcolm's breath caught. "Director? Me?" "Yes," said the sheikh simply. "You will lead a program that teaches language, ethics, and global cooperation. You will hire instructors, manage outreach, and serve as its public face. The salary, of course, will reflect the responsibility." He slid the envelope forward. "The offer is already signed." Malcolm stared at it, motionless. His heart thudded. The city lights outside seemed to blur. "Sir," he whispered, "I don't have a degree in management. I've never even run a team before." The sheikh smiled faintly. "Leadership is not taught in schools. It is learned in silence, in service, in struggle. You have led without authority your whole life. Now it is time to lead with it." Malcolm sat back, dazed. Why me? The Sheikh's voice softened. Because the world does not need more powerful men, it needs good ones. And goodness cannot be bought. It must be lived. He paused, studying Malcolm's expression. Tell me something. When you cleaned those offices every night, what did you think about? Malcolm smiled sadly. Sometimes I'd imagine what it would be like to sit at those tables instead of wiping them. Not for pride, just to be heard. I'd picture my mom's face and think how proud she'd be if people listened to me, even once. She's listening now, the Sheikh said gently. Through your courage. Malcolm swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Sir, if I take this job, I'll give everything I have. But I need you to know, this isn't about money for me. The Sheikh nodded approvingly. That is precisely why you deserve it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in silk. My father gave me this, he said, unwrapping a worn brass key attached to a leather tag inscribed with Arabic script. It belonged to his first workshop. He told me, when you find someone who understands work as worship, give it to them. He placed it in Malcolm's palm. The key was heavy, almost warm, engraved with the words. Al-Karamah fi al-Amal, dignity in work. Malcolm stared at it, speechless. This is not a gift, the Sheikh said softly. It is a trust. Emotion rose in Malcolm's chest like a tide. I don't know what to say. Say yes, said the Sheikh again, smiling. And when people ask who you are, tell them you're a man who cleaned floors until he was asked to clean hearts. For a moment, both men were silent, the city's hum filling the space like music. Finally, Malcolm whispered, Yes, sir. I accept. The Sheikh's eyes glimmered. Good. Then tomorrow, we begin the work that truly matters. He turned to the window once more, gesturing toward the skyline. Look out there, Mr. Reed. What do you see? Malcolm followed his gaze. The skyscrapers rose like monuments to ambition, their lights piercing the twilight. I see power, he said quietly. The Sheikh shook his head gently. No. You see height. Power is not in the height of buildings, it is in the depth of character. He placed a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. And tonight, the tallest man in this city is not me. It is you. When Malcolm finally stepped out into the night, the air was cool, carrying the scent of rain and roasted chestnuts from a street vendor nearby. The limousine driver opened the door, but Malcolm paused, gazing up at the sky instead. He didn't feel small anymore. As he rode through the city, the buildings no longer loomed over him, they bowed in shimmering reflections across the car windows. He clutched the brass key in his hand, its engraving pressing into his palm like a promise. In the reflection, he no longer saw a janitor. He saw a man with purpose. When he reached home, he placed the key beside his mother's photograph and whispered, You always said my hands could build something. I just never knew it would be this. Outside, a breeze rustled the curtains, gentle and approving, as though the night itself had heard. And somewhere across the river, in a tower of glass and gold, a Saudi tycoon looked out at the same sky, smiling, because he knew the world had just gained one more man who understood the true meaning of respect. The ballroom of the New York International Forum glittered like a crown that evening, chandeliers dripping with crystal, cameras flashing, a sea of polished shoes and silk gowns. It was the closing night of the Global Ethics Summit, hosted by Al-Sahim Global Holdings, where the world's most powerful executives gathered to hear the Sheikh's address on leadership and human dignity in the modern age. But that night, the Sheikh wasn't the only one scheduled to speak. Across the front row, journalists whispered into their recorders. Politicians exchanged polite smiles. On the far left, a man in a dark tailored suit sat with quiet composure, hands folded in his lap. Malcolm Reed, once a janitor, now director of the Al-Sahim Foundation for Dignity and Work. Only a few weeks had passed since the offer that had changed his life, but already his name had begun to travel, the janitor who spoke Arabic to a billionaire, the man who silenced the boardroom. And tonight, under the chandeliers of the world's elite, he was about to speak again. Behind the stage, Sheikh Fahd adjusted his cufflinks, the golden embroidery of his bisht catching the warm light. His chief of staff approached quietly. "Your Excellency," he said, "the speech is prepared. Shall I cue the teleprompter?" The Sheikh smiled faintly. "Not tonight. Tonight, another man will speak." The aide blinked. "You mean Mr. Reed?" "Yes," said the Sheikh softly. "The world listens to money too often. Tonight, it will listen to humility." When the lights dimmed, the master of ceremonies stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Sheikh Fahd Al-Sahim." Thunderous applause filled the room. The Sheikh walked to the microphone, graceful, calm, his presence commanding without effort. But instead of beginning his remarks, he gestured toward the audience. "Before I speak," he said in a voice that carried like music, "there is another voice you must hear first, the voice that reminded me what leadership truly means. Please welcome Mr. Malcolm Reed." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Cameras turned. Murmurs rose like waves. Malcolm froze for a heartbeat, then rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. The applause began hesitantly, then grew as the Sheikh stepped aside and placed a hand on his shoulder in silent support. Malcolm walked to the podium, the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He looked out at 1,000 faces, diplomats, CEOs, investors, the same kinds of people who once never saw him at all. He took a breath, steady and deep. "Good evening," he began quietly. "My name is Malcolm Reed. Until a few months ago, I was a janitor." The murmuring stopped instantly. "I cleaned floors in the same buildings where people made million-dollar decisions," he continued. "I emptied their trash, wiped their tables, and listened to their words echo off walls I couldn't afford to build. I was invisible, until one day, a man spoke a language I hadn't heard in years." He paused, eyes finding the Sheikh in the front row. "I answered him, in Arabic, and that simple act changed my life. Not because of what I said, but because he listened. That's the part people don't understand." He looked across the hall, voice growing stronger. "Respect isn't about position. It isn't about money, skin color, or the clothes you wear. Respect is about seeing, truly seeing, another human being." The words rolled through the room like a tide. "When I was in the military, I learned how to salute rank. When I cleaned offices, I learned how to salute silence. But neither taught me what this man," he gestured toward the Sheikh, "taught me in one moment, that real leadership begins when we recognize the worth of those who serve." Cameras flashed, catching the emotion in his eyes. Some of the executives in the crowd shifted. Uncomfortably, others nodded slowly, humbled. He continued, voice steady, resonant. "My mother used to tell me, son, your work doesn't define you, how you treat people while you work does. She believed every job, no matter how small, has dignity. She was right. Because when you give your best, even in silence, you're shaping the world in ways no one may ever notice." He stepped back from the podium, hands resting on its sides, and took a breath before adding, but there's something worse than being unseen, and that's forgetting to look. We all say we value equality, yet how often do we look past the people who hold our doors, clean our floors, serve our meals? Every empire collapses the same way, when it stops honoring the hands that built it. You could have heard a pin drop. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. One of the CEOs leaned forward, elbows on knees, his face softened by shame. Malcolm's gaze swept the audience, calm, unwavering. I stand here tonight not because I'm special, but because one man chose to see me. Sheikh Fahd reminded me that character has no uniform. He reminded all of us that humanity doesn't need translation. The Sheikh lowered his head, humbled. Malcolm's voice quieted, turning reflective. So, to every person who's ever been ignored, underestimated, or dismissed, don't mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is the ground where strength grows roots. And one day, the world will hear you. A long pause. Then, softly, he said in Arabic. Alitaram la yuda, inama yuktasab. Respect cannot be given, it must be earned. He let the words linger in the air like incense. And when you earn it with honesty, humility, and heart, no one can ever take it away. He looked down for a moment, his voice breaking slightly. To my mother, this one's for you. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the hall, wave after wave. People stood to their feet, the powerful, the proud, the unseeing, clapping for the man they had once overlooked. Sheikh Fahd rose slowly, eyes glistening. He walked to the stage, embraced Malcolm, and whispered something only the two of them could hear. You have taught the world its oldest lesson again, that greatness wears no crown. The cameras flashed as they stood side by side, the billionaire and the janitor, equals in the light. Later that night, after the banquet ended and the city fell quiet again, Malcolm stood alone on the terrace, gazing out at the skyline. The night wind brushed against his face, cool and clean. In his hand, he still held the old brass key the Sheikh had given him, its engraving catching the moonlight. Dignity in work. He smiled faintly. Behind him, the Sheikh joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. You spoke from the soul tonight, he said. I just told the truth, Malcolm replied softly. That, said the Sheikh, is all that truth ever needs. They stood in silence for a long time, the city glittering beneath them like 1,000 witnesses. Finally, Malcolm said, do you ever think respect can change the world? The Sheikh's eyes followed the horizon. It already has, he said. One room at a time. They clinked their cups together gently. Below them, New York pulsed with life, restless, flawed, magnificent. Somewhere far off, a streetlight flickered over a janitor pushing a mop across a marble floor. And perhaps, somewhere deep in that man's heart, he knew, the world was finally beginning to see.